Welcome to another episode of Distory with Kate and Kirk. My name is Kirk from walruscarp.com, and this evening we are going to be discussing Mr. Toad's Wild Ride in Disneyland. And thank goodness we're finally finishing this, because Kate and I have been riding this thing forever, and like a beaten horse, we won't stop hitting it.
I know. I always know when you reach like the tipping point and you're like, I can't do this anymore. I need to move on. We've reached that point.
We're there. Hello, welcome. But you know what? In all honesty, you are going to enjoy this episode because there are lots of little fun historical moments that lead us into one of the most iconic scenes, which is going to be the hot place, aka I can only use 6, so I'm going to burn one right now. We're going right to hell, kids. I got 5 more.
Yeah. Well, we both get 6, right? Not just you.
We both get 6.
Okay.
Yes. I'll keep a tally.
Okay.
Keep a tally. With me to celebrate this amazing epicness and fiery inferno is, of course, Kate, the Disney Cicerone. Kate, how we doing this evening?
Doing really great. I just got back from Disneyland, so I'm not all awake yet, but I had such an amazing time, and I actually found some things for Mr. Toad. One thing that I really feel like we need to do, we are going to go forward. We're going to go into prison. We're going to get hit by a train. We're going to go into the hot place. But before we do that, we have to go back just ever so slightly, because I found something that I didn't realize existed in Disneyland. Kudos to this amazing stranger who took this photo of me sitting in this toad car.
What?
So trying to take...
What in the what?
I had my lounge fly, and I had the lights on my lounge fly, and I was dressed in my Mr. Toad bound, and I was like, I'm by myself, so I had no one to take my picture. And this really sweet stranger came up and was like, hey, do you want a picture? I'm like, yes, please. So now I have this picture of me.
That is a great photo. Honestly,
right?
that's really well done. The lighting is good. It's actually incredible. That's a great photo.
So anyway, I just want to share that because I was very excited and very grateful to that stranger who did that. So
thank you, stranger in Disneyland, taking photos of Kate.
Yes, thank you. But I do want to go back.
Normally we'd call security, but this was welcomed.
I do want to go back a little bit to the law court scene, which we just left at the end of this previous episode, because I want to look at the sconces. Remember that they look like flames in this scene, and they're kind of painted like red on the bottom and like orange on the top. So it definitely looks like a little flame that's going on. Well, I realized as I was walking around Disneyland that these flame sconces are a lot of places. So it's right they have ones that are not painted. They're just white instead, that are right next to the carousel. They have the same kind of like lamp to them. So the carousel has one, and then also in the Haunted Mansion has these flame sconces as well. In the load area, they have like 2 smaller ones, and then they have a big one in the center, and they look like flames as well, but these ones have more of an orange tint to them. So
okay,
I just thought that was really interesting, because it just like, I didn't even realize that these were all over the place. And so I wonder what other places they are. So as you're
must have gotten a good deal, you know? Hey, you guys got flame sconces? If you give me about 200 of them, can you give me a price break?
I'm sure that's exactly how the conversation went down in Imagineering.
Probably.
Yeah. But anyway, so if you're wandering around Disneyland, keep an eye out for some flame sconces, especially because we've got a little tie back into Mr. Toad's Wild Ride.
Flame sconces. Team Flame Sconce.
I also want to mention, since I went on the ride again and got kind of fresh eyes on it, there's 3 chimney sweeps, not 2, like I said previously. I think one of them probably wasn't working in the footage we had, which is a very common thing when some element's not working. Actually, so I went on Alice in Wonderland, Kirk, and I know that's like one of your favorites there. And the second set of doors to like go to the outside to go down the ramp hasn't been working like the whole time I was there.
So was it just wide open?
It was just open.
Yeah.
I was like,
okay.
I thought they would fix it overnight, and they didn't. It was just open the whole time. I was like, well, that's a bummer. So
yeah,
that's what it is. The other thing is, you and I said last episode, remember how we saw the weasel in the window and the
weasel
town
window.
Square? Yeah.
The silhouette.
Right. Well, and we were just like, that's the only place the weasels show up. And like, of course, in our comic
did we
section,
find another weasel?
There's 2 weasels hanging from the chandeliers in the hallway, dude. Like, and we both forgot about them.
Oh, all the way in the beginning, yeah.
And so we did forget about that. So thank you to our Distory listener who was like, hey,
we stink at this, dude. Okay, get over it. We're awful. No, here's the God's honest truth. That was like 10 episodes ago.
Yeah.
It's hard to remember everything. Like, we really need to, I mean, the ride-throughs are short enough. We really need to rewatch them real quick again, just to refresh.
Yeah, for sure.
Dang weasels, dude.
I know, the weasels got us. So
well, they get everybody. I get it.
Anyway, so that's all just kind of the going back I had. So I feel like we need to move forward. Kirk, do you want to take us on a video? Do you have video queued up for that?
Yeah, let's do video action. We are in the courtroom for the start. So this is where we finished off last time. And we're just going to go into the prison. I'm going to stop there because I don't know how far you want me to go.
That's pretty much it. So here's a little bit of a refresher about the track layout that we had. This one I kind of made up for you guys. So you can see how we went last episode. Right in the center there, it says London Square. That's where we were last episode. We went around the fountain. We went into the law court. We saw the judge. And now we're going to the prison, which is this tiny little square. It's on the right-hand side. So the interesting thing is when you're on this ride, you don't actually really see the prison at all. I literally was like trying to look for it, and it's like so dark in that corner, you barely see anything. It's like it doesn't exist. And so we're going to show you what it looks like, so because this has better like lighting, it amplifies the black light so you can see it a little bit better. When we leave the courtroom, it does say prison on the up above the doors. So that's how we know we're going to prison. We're not just making it up because you can't see it anyway. There is a cop that is on a flat on the left with his arms crossed, and he has a baton. So he's escorting you to prison. And then we are going to the jail. This is probably the clearest shot that I have of what you actually see here. You see like a series of doors with illuminated windows on two sides. There is a truncated Tower of London because in the movie, Toad gets put in the tower. And that, I think, is why we see the Tower Bridge, which is actually foreshadowing in the scene, where you go in the docks and it goes bum, 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 and you see the Tower Bridge, which we talked about at length in a previous episode. I think that's why we see the Tower Bridge, not only because it's time appropriate for Mr. Toad in this setting, but also because of the fact that he's going to end up in the tower. So it's more foreshadowing for this.
Yeah, makes sense.
We burst out of jail. And I was thinking about, the original mural in the beginning that's on this, what looks like a tapestry in the load area. We actually do see Toad go from the law court into jail. And then we see him bursting through the back wall and then getting hit by a train. I was like, well, does Toad burst through a wall in the film? So I actually went back to watch it again to see. And there is like a scene where he does like throw the little ball and chain that's like in his ankle, attach his ankle. He does like throw it through a wall. So that does exist, but it's not like he's driving a car through the wall. That's just kind of for this particular artwork here.
Well, I mean, Kate, we did just drive through a courtroom. I'm pretty sure you don't get sentenced while you're sitting in a motor car.
A motor car, yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like we bashed through and immediately were guilty. Like, that dude was ready to sentence us before we even got through the courtroom
guilty
doors.
Thank you. That is all. Mm-hmm. Indeed. Yeah. So anyway, that's pretty much all I have for the prison, unless you have anything else. I have one thing
for the prison. If you go back to that picture of the doors in the background, because there is one kind of little foreshadowy thing, because you see the cop on the left-hand side, he's crossing his arms, but in that center column, there is a ring of keys, and the ring of keys, then you see several doors. Doors have shackle locks on them, but you'll notice that out of the obvious 3 doors and another window, they're all illuminated, meaning, in my opinion, they're all being used. Somebody's using them, because almost all the windows are illuminated, except for one. There's one where the lights are out. So to me, I'm piecing together the police officer was supposed to grab those keys and put us into that first cell on the left-hand side, which doesn't have lights on, but we had other plans, and our other plans were to never be escorted into prison and head on out through the right-hand side.
Yeah, I think that is spot on. I 100% agree. And I do in our chat, there Ray is also mentioning it looks like this scene is taking place outside rather than inside the prison, and I agree. We're not actually in a jail cell. We're just headed towards the jail.
Yeah,
but we
it's,
never
it's
actually
like
go
that
in
prison sign is saying like this way to prison, even though it doesn't say that, it just says the word prison. You don't
Right.
you're not immediately thrown into a cell. Like we have to be taken there, and that's why I think this police officer is there.
Exactly.
Yep.
I agree. All right. Do you have anything else for prison, or shall we move on to the train?
Let's bust through this jail.
Okay, let's do it. So now we're headed around the corner. If you see, there's prison, and now we're headed around. We're making a turn, and we're headed towards the train scene. I wanted to show a little bit of the layout difference between 1983 and the original Toad layout from 1955, because obviously this whole layout change, they added, 25% to all of these rides. We've already mentioned that before, how they basically added this entire center section of what you're seeing here, which is the London Square, the Law Court. None of that existed in the 1955 version. So I've had a couple of people commenting who went on the original 1955 version, just as I've been posting about Mr. Toad and whatnot. Something I keep seeing over and over again is everybody says, I remember this being longer. I remember the train scene being longer than it is now. And I was like, okay, well, it's interesting that so many people have that common experience, and why are they feeling that way? Because here's what it looked like in 1955. And if you actually see, there is the railroad tunnel there in the center, then there's the train, and then we hit the jaws of hell, right? Oh, that was one for me. Kirk's tallying it.
For those that care, on the heck count, that's one for Kate and one for Kirk.
Yeah, we have to be careful how we use that this episode.
You blew one real easy on that.
I
That was a
know.
little too cavalier.
Darn. But if you can see, so I'm going to go back and forth here just so you can kind of see, even though they're different dimensions, but it does seem like the train scene is longer in the 1983 version, which is interesting because people remember it being longer in 1955. So why is that? I was like trying to figure out why is that.
Yeah, that
And
1955 version seems so much shorter.
it does. So I was like, why do people have this perception? And I think it's because the lead up is so much longer in the 1955 version than it is here. Because you think of what just happened to us is we blew through prison, and then suddenly we're like getting hit by a train, right? There's like no lead up to this at all. But if you remember back in the 1955 version, they have this like meandering countryside scene where you start to see the tunnel for quite a bit and start to get used to the idea of, oh, the train is coming before you actually go into the tunnel. And I think that's why people feel like it used to be longer, because if you even look on the layout here, it has this kind of like S curves right before it that really kind of like emphasize, oh, we're headed into this area with the train. And I don't know.
Do you think then, based on everything that I've seen and you've just shown, don't you feel it's because everyone's including the train scene as the precursor train and then the tunnel? So yes, if you consider it that way, the whole entire train scene is much larger, because in the 80s, it's just we snap right into getting hit.
Yeah. It's like you're judged, there's prison, and then train. Like instantly you're done.
Yeah, and we
toast.
don't get that lead in at all. You don't even see that we're going into a train tunnel. Like at least in this photo, it says tunnel number 13, danger. You see the signalman. So like all of those things are present and are completely gone in the 1983 version.
Right.
Which
exactly.
They should have at least kept that archway tunnel to know that it's a train tunnel.
Yeah, well, we do have some things here. So let's take a look at that then. That's it. So we do see, but you can't see it. That's the thing, is you can't see it because it's so dark.
Wait. Hey, for anybody who's counting, Kate just said, well, you can't see what you can see here.
Yeah, I did say that.
So what can we see that we can't?
Technically, what you should be able to see if it was lit better, okay? If there was more lighting in the scene, it says there is an archway that is here.
Oh my gosh. Yes, there is. But that is not well lit in any of the videos or anything.
Yeah. And it says do not enter above the train. So if you remember the 1955 version, it had, tunnel number 13s, and it says danger on a sign next to it. So they took the essence of that 1955 version and they did put it, they just kind of reorganized it a little bit and reinvented it. But it does say that. And there is also train crossing gates that are similar to it that have the red and white stripe on it. They had, I think it's black and white stripes here in the 1955 version. Yes, Kirk.
Miss Kate?
Yes.
How come they didn't put just that style of, one that we're familiar with from the previous attraction, barrier, where it's a little bit thinner and it's just over like one arm, and it would have like the RR on there and maybe even the danger sign? How come we don't have that, Miss Kate?
Well, that one doesn't look like you burst through it, or if it does, it like just bumps out of the way. It doesn't look like it goes all the way across the tracks. Do you have a thought about it?
What if we extended that one, and then it would be like it was down, just like any other railroad crossing? Like I don't know a single railroad crossing that has a piece of plywood that goes all the way to the floor.
Yeah, it's interesting in the 1955 version because it does have like the stick part of it, but it actually does have a black part that goes all the way down almost to the floor that you can't see. So it's like it's a full-on door, kind of like the ones in 1983 are full-on doors, but there's one on either side. And this picture's not great from 1955 that I can't see the other side to see if there's a second one. I'm assuming there is, but I don't know for sure.
Because I think that's where you're busting through.
Yeah, for sure. And so, I don't know, did you have any thoughts about it?
I just wish we did that. Moving on.
You wanted it to be thinner? Is that all?
Yeah, I want it to be the same color and pattern as the original, and that we distinctively have railroad crossing sign, so that it just is one other call out, so it's a little bit more distinct rather than us just smashing through.
Yeah. No, I get that. And I think that the red is probably because not only is it foreshadowing for where we're headed, but I think red is danger. In our brains, it's like psychologically red is danger versus black and white. So I think they were going for authenticity a little bit more in the 1955 version with the black and white. And this one, they're like, we have a split second to get people to know they're in danger because people are not really going to see much. Remember that that rule of like visual economy that we see Imagineering take when they only have a hot second to communicate. This is what you need. Yeah. It wasn't, but it was a happy coincidence. They only have a little bit of a moment to communicate, hey, this is what is happening to you. And so they have to do it as quickly as possible. So we see red, we see danger, and that's just like human experience. So I think that's why they changed it to red, personally, if I had to guess.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. On the other side of the tracks, there is a flashing light that exists. Remember, we talked about lamps in a previous episode for quite a while, specifically railroad lamps and lanterns. This is a flashing lamp, not to be confused with the lantern. But there used to be a different style of it. It looks like if you see in this one, it looks like they've actually changed the style of lamp.
Oh, yeah.
Because it looks like it used to be actually a lantern, because that to me screams lantern, because it looks like it has like glass with like, lines of wire around it or metal, versus what we see now, which is this one that has it's more of like just a bright light encased in a whole metal thing. So to me, it looks like they actually updated it and changed the lamp to be a little bit probably more accurate for what it should be for this tunnel. We do hear the sounds of a railroad signal, so just auditorily, it's warning us that a train is coming, right? As it goes ding, 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 right?
Sorry, I think my audio cut out. Can you do that again?
No, you always try to make me repeat my sounds. No.
I've never done that in this whole entire podcast. I would never do that. That was literally some sort of technical glitch.
No. And then we head into the oncoming train. Now, Kirk, I know you had a few things to say about the train. Do you want to take it from here?
Sure. So I am a big proponent of trying to figure out what kind of train hit Mr. Toad. So it kind of led me down a little bit of a rabbit trail on what types of trains would be available and in use in the mid 1800s in England. So I can't 100% confirm, and some of the photos are different than the original concept art. So let's start at the beginning with, in the mid-19th century, there was a passenger rail travel system in England that exploded in popularity. Not exploded as in like bang, but several iconic trains and routes started to emerge in the 1830s and all the way through the 1870s. The Great Western Railway express trains were widely used by passengers during this time period, particularly going from Isbard Kingdom Brunel's Broad Gauge Railway. This connected London to Bristol, and it used broad gauge tracks that were 7 foot instead of 4 foot and 8.5 inches, which created a smoother and faster ride. And there was a new class of locomotives that was introduced in 1847 that could reach speeds of 60 miles per hour, called the Iron Dukes. So from 1830 to 1850, we get the first intercity passenger railways. And then from London to the Midlands in the north, hang on, I'll share a map because this is pretty expansive when you look at how large. This is by the ends of the 1800s, from London's Paddington to pretty much everywhere in England is absolutely astounding for the time period. But I think you have two major innovations that happen here. It's those broad gauge tracks, which allow them to lay them faster because they're 7 foot versus 4 foot sections. And then the fact that they're smoother and faster, meaning you could have these trains get people to places in a much quicker fashion. So much so that these trains end up getting some nicknames. So I'm going to just show you some kind of cool pictures of trains because I just think they're fun. This was one of the passenger train vehicles. You can see that these ones were, they use coal and steam to power these engines. The one thing to note in Mr. Toad's world is that there is no lantern or lamp on the front of these trains in comparison to that concept art. Because when you look at the concept art, that sucker had what I would assume is more along the lines, and maybe this is just a really rudimentary older one. So this would have probably been right at the 1830s and not one of these Iron Duke style engines like you're seeing here. So that's kind of my assumption with that.
Well, a light is critical because we're talking about the light coming towards you in the attraction, right? Like I'm just
exactly
putting the pieces together here. Yeah.
Now, these early engines were nicknamed the Flying Dutchman.
Fun.
In particular, the London train was known as the Flying Dutchman because it was common with many steam and diesel locomotives, like the Northeastern Railway A1s. This is like real train geeky stuff. So if you're into train geeky stuff, you may even own some of these. The British Rail Class 55 Deltic, and it was named after a famous racehorse who was called the Dutchman. And so apparently the Dutchman won a race in the Derby in St. Leger in 1849. So it was so fast that it was called the Flying Dutchman, named after the famous Dutch Admiral Trump. There you go. So
interesting.
There you go. That's some little bit of train history for you. I don't know for sure, but I'm assuming that it's probably one of these style passenger trains because you're going into England the entire time. You know, what other kind of trains? You could have obviously like freight trains and cargo trains, but these things were moving so fast, 60 miles per hour, carrying people. Great railway system is being created at this point. Like I think it all lines up.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting. And so I did look back at the film. I was like, where does the train come back in with this package film of the Ichabod and Mr. Toad?
So for those that are listening, I'm just staring at Toad in his like dress and bonnet outfit, which is so funny.
He's a little pink dress on because he had to wear a disguise to get out of prison, right? He stuck out of prison. That's kind of why he's in that outfit. But he does steal a train engine, and then he shovels coal into it while being pursued by another engine filled with policemen, which I'm like, honestly, like, what are they going to do if they catch him? Like, are they going to jump from one train to the other? Like, you can't, like, pass him like a police car.
Yeah.
Like, logically, this doesn't make any sense. But anyway, he jumps off the train onto a bridge and into a river in the film. So that's where a train comes in, but he doesn't actually get hit by a train. So that's why everybody's like, why does he get hit by a train here? Well, we'll get a little bit more into why he ends up where he's at in a minute. But I do have some really fun pictures of the actual light moving towards you. Kirk, do you want to take us on the film through this just so we can see the action of the light moving towards us?
So we're crashing through, and you notice that there's a rail system up above that Kate's going to talk about, I'm sure, but the light is actually moving towards us as we're going underneath it.
Yeah, so there's two things happening at the same time. And what it is that you see, this is actually looking kind of backwards towards the prison in this. This was somebody who got evacuated off the ride and took pictures. I didn't take any of these photos, but you can see the mechanism is actually on a track that pulls towards you. And it has a big light in the center, and then there's two little red lights on either side of it. And that's what you see pulling towards you as you move forward. So there's two things kind of happening at once, and you're kind of like passing each other. It goes over your head as you go underneath it. So there's a track, and then you see that they have a series of flats on either side that are these flats that make it look like it's totally black, and you're moving through it. Then at the end, of course, you get hit by the train, and so you see this kind of like starburst artwork at the end, and then flashes and whatnot.
The starburst flat is so anticlimactic after getting hit by a train. It's very funny because you have all this strobe lighting that's like simulating, and then there's the auditory crashing itself. But then there's a period where it's almost got like a millennial pause, where it's like a second and a half of just staring at the flat with light on it. It's very strange.
Yeah, it is weird, but it is what it is. And you can see that the wood, also the flats around it, are cut out to look almost like a cloudish shape, so
it's like a cartoon explosion.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing you notice is on the floor are these little bars, which I'm assuming are probably like a metal, that are screwed into the floor. And I think that this is the same thing that we see, or we feel rather, in the scene with the harbor, as we go towards the Tower Bridge. And this is what you'll feel underneath each side of your wheels. And it goes bump, 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 because it makes you feel like you're running over those railroad ties as you go down the track. So that's how they achieve that effect.
Yeah, I think it's the same. It's identical. Yeah, I mean, I'm rereading this e-ticket article, and they specifically do mention those bumps. It says, now our other senses tell us that we're in trouble. First, we feel the rapid bumping as our wheels shudder over what must be the wooden ties of the railroad track. Our ears detect the roar of an oncoming locomotive. Its steam exhaust loud as light returns. We're swallowed once again. And then now we're heading into the jaws.
Well, at this point, it's good time for us to just take a quick pause and chat about some of the things that we are currently doing outside of Distory, because we do a couple of things here and there outside of Distory. Kirk, what do you have going on over there at Walrus Carp?
We make clothes. No, I started back in 2019. A lot of folks who have known me, we started out making, the very first thing we ever made were sunglasses, and these are polarized Mickey bar sunglasses. We also have Dole Whip ones. We also have some Spooky Manor ones as well. And yeah, they're great. They're affordable, and they're polarized, and they look great. They've got that kind of Wayfarer view on them, and you can get them with free shipping at walruscarp.com. What do you got going on, Kate?
Well, I am currently working on finishing editing the sequel to the very first book that I ever wrote about Disney. That is first book ever, anytime, which was A Glimpse of the Magic, Finding Ourselves in the Disney Story. And this is a curated collection of writings about the Disney parks, integrating Disney history and kind of like how we see ourselves. Currently, I'm writing a sequel to this one. So this one's more like wonder and magic, and my next one's more about like hope and moving forward. And then there will be a third book in this particular series, at least, if not more beyond that, because I know a lot of people have been asking for more of this type of writing, which is kind of what they see in some of my posts online. So you can get this book, A Glimpse of the Magic, and all 3 of my other books that is a fiction series over at Amazon.com, or you can just go disneycicerone.com. You can find all things there. Another place, if you can't wait for that book to come out and you really want to read some of my writing, I do also have a brand new Substack, and some of it has exclusive sneak peeks into that next book, and that's just disneycicerone.substack.com. Kirk, do you want to take us on the video into the next scene?
Mm-hmm. Stop.
All right. So we have arrived at the jaws of hell. Number 2. I'm using number 2.
Update the count. She's used 2. She's got 4 left.
We had to say it. So this has like a stone demon face with steam coming out of it, which is hard to see from these video and these pictures, but it does supposed to have steam coming kind of like out of the eyes and around it. Steam is supposed to be everywhere in this scene. And just kind of a callback to the 1955 version. We covered this really extensively in our episode about the original version of Mr. Toad, but I just want to pull this back just to give an idea of what the Imagineers were going for. When they were designing this version, you have to talk about what was in the original. So this is what you used to be able to see heading into the hot place of Mr. Toad. And this one was likely modeled after the French nightclub called Cabaret de l'Enfer, which is the Heck Cabaret. I don't want to use another one too soon.
What? What is it, Kate? The what Cabaret?
I said the Heck Cabaret, but
the Heck Cabaret.
H-E double hockey sticks Heck Cabaret from the 1980s, which looked like this. So this is in Paris, which is basically just a nightclub. We did have a Distory listener that also pointed out that this was likely an influence for Beetlejuice's Dante's Inferno room, which you can see here.
100%.
Which, yeah, like I didn't even realize that was connected back to this nightclub, but I would be shocked if it wasn't. So really kind of an interesting connection there. So thank you. I wish I remember who it was that said it. So, but thank you to our Distory listener who pointed that out. I have a whole bunch of things about another influence for this, but do you want to talk about this a little bit before I dive into all of my animation history?
Welcome to Norman's Ghost Show, a traveling ghost show from around the 1900s. So I was trying to think back, okay, well, where is some iconography that any of this, that people could have actually visited and seen or had photos of? Because Imagineering loves to actually take physical attractions and things that have already existed and repurpose it. And you're going to see me kind of give a background of why making a hell scene.
Oh, that's 2 for you.
Actually makes sense, because I think it does in retrospect of the things that came roughly about 20 years prior to it. So we're a little bit further back in the 1900s with this traveling ghost show. It was a predecessor to dark rides, and it was called a phantasmagoria, or a ghost show. These shows appeared on traveling fairgrounds using a technique of the magic lantern, which is a primitive type of projector to create a frightful and supernatural experience inside a dark indoor environment. The phantasmagoria was a dynamic and exciting media format in which the audience wasn't moved physically, but images were scaled and moved around them to create a vertiginous effect, so like a vertigo feeling.
Oh, interesting.
Over time, the advent of electricity afforded safe and more controllable ways of illuminating such indoor experiences, and the control over illumination in the atmosphere created by artificial lights is one of the key elements that allowed for the development of the dark ride. But I think the outside of this, particularly if you notice, there are lots of goblins and lots of demonic devils with wings and arms outstretched and mouths agape. All of those things are critical iconography of the early scary, spooky houses. So we're going to talk about one that was created in a place in New York that probably most people have known, that is called Coney Island. So a lot of people know Coney Island. Coney Island started, in the 1800s, and there was tons of different little amusement parks that were within Coney Island. It's not just one location. There's multiple. And within these multiple little theme parks, if you will, it's kind of like permanent carnivals is the best way to explain it. Yeah. There was one that was built that was called Dreamland. Dreamland was advertised at Luna Park, costing $1.5 million to build, advertising that they were going to put another $3.5 million into its opening, which, to put things in perspective, this was May 14th, 1904.
Oh, that's
that
a ton
an
of money.
investment of $3.5 million into New York City's theme park space.
Wow.
Just like kind of like putting things in perspective, we're talking about, over $100 million worth of value over a very short period of time to keep people entertained, which I just think is cool. In Dreamlands, there was lots of different popular attractions. They had a circus, they had massive restaurants, they had a beautiful ballroom where you could dance. They also had a really inappropriate place that I can't say the name of it, but let's just say it was a small city. So this small city housed very small folks and attractions.
Oh,
it's the best way. It's exactly what you think it is, but it was a much, much smaller scale. So like when you approached the buildings, you appeared huge, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
so
interesting.
But the big attraction that gets built here, and the one that I actually care about, is going to be called, and I'm gonna lose it on that. I'm already gonna. I hate that I have to do this. It's called Hellgate.
Number 3.
Number 3. So this attraction cost 10 cents.
I love
and
that 10
this
cents
is
is
really
like in the same font as the title.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty wild. Hellgate itself was an attraction that was actually a boat ride. So when you would go on this, you would pay your 10 cents, and it would take you through all of these different like demonic and
I'm like watching you struggle.
Let me restart. The Heckgate ride.
Doesn't have the same ring to it. You
No,
did
it
this
doesn't.
to yourself,
I know. Passengers would travel into the inside of the earth, finishing the ride with a massive explosion. This was in July 8th, 1905, by Theodore Waters in the Harper's Weekly. The pool is merely a spiral trough made of wood and iron through which water carries the boats through the center, where there's a slope that suddenly dips and allows them to slip beneath the outer rims of the spiral into a subterranean channel which follows a tortuous course underneath the building. There are scenes intended to corroborate the popular conception that the Earth's interior is like a it's Dante's Inferno, basically. So the Earth's interior are the circles of heck. And as spectators are going around through this boat ride, they are witnessing the subterranean horrors until they are eventually shot up through one side of the pool and back to the surface. So
Interesting.
you would think that this ride would be just to like terrify, but this was a religious ride. It was considered purposefully built to be religious.
This is where you're going to end up, kids, if you don't do the right thing. So,
crap.
Just
All right,
saying.
Here goes. I got going through Hellgate at Dreamland.
It's 4.
After many days of aggravating delay, finally the ride last opened. This is a new water ride that has undergone a tedious experimental stage before being declared ready. It's the latest novelty at Dreamlands. Looking down from the top of the wide entrance is a large figure of Satan with his extended wings painted red. It suggests one of Door's illustrations in Dante's Inferno. Ticket sellers, I love this, were dressed in red robes wearing horned caps to sell to the venturesome. The boats pass along Circling Canal, which has a precipitous descent at the center in which the boat takes much speed, and the ride is through several minutes through winding caverns. Now, pretty neat.
Wait.
I like the fact that there's like a giant demon on it. In fact, when I was growing up, there was a Dante's Inferno in Maurice Pier that had a similar kind of vibe, and it did go through the different levels, if you will. But sadly, this building actually does get destroyed.
Oh, no.
So, yeah, what? What?
Oh, just saying, oh, no, it burned down.
Yeah. So
tragic.
It is tragic. So all of Dreamland actually lights ablaze, and it starts in that attraction. And so basically what happened was there was a water system that was used for deterring fires and whatnot. And they would test it, and it had like a general pressure system. And that pressure system went to New York City. And if there was any issues of water pressure from the new system that they installed like 6 months prior, they wouldn't get the appropriate amount of water pressure to be able to use all of the extinguishing sprinklers as well as fire hoses. And they were using hot tar in the dark ride to repair things. But this hot tar fell over, hit electrical equipment, and literally lit this thing ablaze. So
that sounds
sadly,
unsafe.
Heckgate goes up in flames.
It is no more. Well,
It is no more.
Can you go back to the picture of the Satan on top of the building? Because I think I actually have some of that artwork from one of Dante's Inferno's versions.
So how does this all connect back to Mr. Toad? Well, I think because this concept of I think it seems very disproportional and strange to be going to the hot place. Because you automatically want to go, well, did Toad live a righteous life or a life of sin that would lead him there? Or this attraction was made in 1955 that put him there, but there was lots of attractions, and I'll talk about another one a little bit later on that's really close to home, because this was Coney Island that had the 10-cent Heckgate, and that was built in the 1900s, like early 1900s, and then burned down. So this concept of going to an inferno and the hot place and seeing Satan is early dark ride history. That was common, and guests really liked those experiences. So I don't think it's that strange to see this as just a mirrored copy of things that were already working as a climax for the end of Mr. Toad. But I don't think it's a moral point.
I would agree it's not a moral thing, although you could make the argument that it is like, you play, you pay, but I don't think that's why they put this in this particular attraction. I would agree with that. I think it has more to do with that it was just to make people laugh and a callback to some of this dark ride history. I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Totally.
Toad.
Totally. Well, thank you for that, Kirk. That was terribly interesting to see the old pictures of those old dark rides, and
it's
ironic.
crazy that we even have some photos of this stuff. Like, dude, these guys are like the first content creators. They're like, we're at Dreamland here, and we're gonna explore everything that they have to offer, including the 10-cent new boat subterranean inferno that they call Heckgate.
Indeed.
When do you think the first selfie was ever taken? Could you imagine like a selfie in 1908? They're like, yo.
They like hold it for like 10 minutes. They didn't smile back then. They wouldn't have smiled because you can't hold that long. Okay. Well, Kirk holds that for 10 minutes. I would love to talk about the Jaws of Hell, specifically about where they got...
Oh! Sorry.
What am I at now? 4? Am I at 4?
You're at 3. You're
I'm
okay.
at 3.
You
Oh,
still have
good.
3
I'm
left.
doing better than you. So that's all that's important.
Doing better than you.
So I want to talk about the stone demon face that we see and where they got the influence for this design specifically for Imagineering. So let's dial back into Imagineering Disney history here. And I have to say that I would be shocked if the inspiration for this particular face did not come from Chernabog, from Fantasia's Night on Bald Mountain sequence from 1940. Okay, so what you're seeing here is the original artwork. This is probably a really, really well cleaned up animation from Bill Teitla, who was the animator of Chernabog. I have a little excerpt from my upcoming book that is coming out this spring that's called A Glimmer of Pixie Dust, Finding Our Hope in the Disney Story. And I do have a chapter that's that is called Animating Forces. And so I talk a little bit about Bill Teitla's work. So here's just a little excerpt from that for you guys. It was said of Bill that in order to access what he needed to create these characters, he had to live in their heads, so to speak, and think like they would think. When asked about his creation of Chernabog, Bill explained, "I imagined that I was as big as a mountain and made of rock. And yet I was feeling and moving." His sketches portray the same sentiment of internal struggle, as Bill was aggressive with his drawing, often making lines so rough that they would rip through the paper. I think Donald Graham put it perfectly when he said of Bill in a 1937 studio art class, "It is obvious that he does not animate forms, but forces." So just a little bit of a sneak peek of that. If you actually want to read that whole chapter, I have that whole chapter as a sneak peek on my Disney Cicerone Substack for all of my subscribers. So you can go and read the whole thing now early if you can't wait for the book to come out. What you're seeing here, this is Bill Teitla, and this is a little model of Chernabog. This is like a little maquette head of Chernabog, and he's glaring at it rather menacingly. And he really did embody these kind of villainous characters. I know that he did the same thing with Stromboli for Pinocchio. So if you ever thought Stromboli is really, really intense, well, you have Bill Teitla to think of that, to thank for that. But ironically, he also animated Baby Dumbo later on because he wanted kind of a break from these super intense characters where he got into the headspace of these characters. And so he modeled Baby Dumbo after his son, which I think is very sweet.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah. But when he was animating Chernabog, he was unhappy with the live-action reference footage from Dracula's Bela Lugosi. So you can see here a side-by-side of Bela Lugosi. He's kind of like has hands above his head, very similar to how Chernabog puts his arms above his head in that. But he was super unhappy with it. Bela Lugosi was kind of aging by this point, and he wasn't getting like the intensity that he needed. So the director of the sequence was Wilfred Jackson, also known as Jackson, Jackson, at the studio, a name that he'd chosen for himself because kids teased him for his name Wilfred, calling him Winifred when he was a kid. So he's like, I'm going to be known as Jackson from here on out. So that's how everybody knew him at Disney Studios. So Teitla actually convinced him to remove his shirt and pose for Chernabog. So this is pictures from in the 1940s from probably the late 30s of Wilfred Jackson posing for Chernabog. And you can see I actually pulled some of the actual pictures of Chernabog to show you how it was influenced. You can see him have his arm kind of raised way above his head, and that's exactly what Chernabog is doing here. And then he pulls it down into a big, like, aggressive point with, not, and he has his finger pointing here, and that's what Chernabog does as well. So that's the reference he used, Bill Teitla used as an animator, was basically from the director of the sequence. And I have this really fun note as well from, I love this one. He's like, you can see all of his ribs in this picture with his arms like stretched straight out, right? And you can see here also Chernabog doing the same thing with his arms out, this kind of aggressive posture. But here's a note from Jackson to Don Perry from 1982. And he says, "Seems kind of ridiculous to think anything this skinny kid did could serve as an inspiration for what Bill Teitla did with his animation in Night on Bald Mountain, doesn't it? Please send them back when you're through with them." He's talking about the pictures that we just saw, yours, Jackson. So this actually came from a book that I got here at D23 this year. It's called Directing at Disney by Don Perry and Pete Docter. And this is a fantastic read if you're interested in the history of animation at all. It has lots and lots and lots of primary source documents that they actually include in here, as well as photos. So you can see all kinds of things. That being aside, that's what I really think is going on with this particular scene with the face.
I agree.
Yeah.
That's tremendous. Your two animation slides right at the beginning too. I mean, they are, if you don't layer them on
fire.
top of that.
Sorry.
They are fire.
Do I get that as like a good joke this year?
That is a great joke.
Thank you.
That is your best joke of the. We need insert some bells. That is the joke of the year. Nicely done. Woo! Kate with the joke of the year.
Thank you.
I don't know how
you.
you're going to do it this early in the
know.
year.
How am I going to top
You've got
that?
many months, but I don't know. You got 10 months to do it. I believe in you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. Shall we keep moving forward here?
Yeah, I just wanted to, if you pop up my screen for just a hot second, this came much, much later. It was in the late, like it's like the late 1900s. This was in Panama City, Florida, in something that was called the Miracle Strip. Now, this had been abandoned, and obviously there's graffiti on it, but man, did people rip off Disney after they did it?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely, because you're going through the mouth, too. All that throws back to the 1880s nightclub in Paris, you know? So really, they're all just ripping off that nightclub. So...
Well, they ripped off somebody who ripped off that nightclub, who ripped off somebody who ripped off somebody who ripped off that nightclub, who ripped off somebody who ripped off somebody who ripped off somebody who ripped off somebody who did the nightclub.
They always say art is just, is always inspired by something else, right? So nothing is like new under the sun. All right, so let's move forward into the attraction here. And I want to talk about what you hear a little bit, because there is actually music in this part of the attraction. And we're hearing... it's a kind of like a remix of, the Toad theme song. Yeah, it's a remix of,
remix.
Are you done? Can we move forward now?
Are you going to say the word?
We're merrily, 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 merrily on our way to nowhere in particular. Okay, so it's another version of that song. And I talked about this over with Elliot, my husband, who is a musicologist, and he said it's probably like two high-pitched piccolos, and he says it's dissonant because they're not playing exactly in sync with each other, so they're playing like very ever slightly off, which to our ear creates that dissonant sound. It doesn't have like, they call it like the devil in music, like it's like there's like specific like chord, the two notes you play together that sounds like the devil in music. It doesn't have that specifically, but because they're like creating this dissonant sound by not playing exactly like, that's what in our ear is just like, it's grating to us as humans. Elliot also said they're overplaying the octave, which it creates this high, shrill, piercing sound. So do with that what you will. And they also go out of tune with each other. He says they also is like a very swoopy articulation to their playing style, and it's played exactly like a very fast jig. So that was what he had to say about the music that we hear in this part that sounds kind of squeaky and high-pitched and a little bit obnoxious. So I think it's cute myself, but yeah.
But Kate's kind of into that thing,
Moving on, let's talk about this judge a little bit that we see, who is now turned into a devil-like character. He looks like Pan with short horns on his head, okay? So I'll come back to that in a second. He's holding a gavel in his hand, like the judge, so that's how we know. Obviously, he looks like the judge, so that's how we know. He's dressed in his robes, but his robes are a different color now. They're red instead of black. But Pan, and he has wings on his back as well. He has little tiny wings. And it throws back to the book, The Wind in the Willows. Remember how we talked about this in a previous episode, how the original cover of the book had Pan on the cover because he was featured in a chapter in the book. So it is a throwback also to The Wind in the Willows itself, that they would have Pan, a Pan-like character, appear within this attraction. We've talked about Pan before when we covered the Haunted Mansion queue, because he's also shows up there twice in the new extended queue of the Haunted Mansion as well. And I have some things, Kirk, about red color and kind of some, demonology and stuff. Do you want me to go there? It. Or do you have stuff you want to...
I want to hear about red and demons.
Okay. So why are devils and demons red? Why do we have this color here? So in medieval Christian art and literature, the devil was often depicted in red to symbolize hellfire, sin, temptation. It was influenced by a lot of biblical descriptions of fire and brimstone. So, I mean, it's not hard to find, the connection between fire, brimstone, and the color red, right? So you can see that in kind of some very old artwork here. You can see there's a little devil who is red, or a demon It's hard to say. But in Greek and Roman mythology, deities like Hades, the god of the underworld, and Mars, the god of war, were often linked to fire and blood, reinforcing red as the color of danger and power. Many cultures also associated red with negative forces like chaos and destruction, with examples like the Egyptian god Seth, who was represented by the color red. Also, in medieval depiction of the devil was borrowed from pagan figures like Pan and satyrs, who are sometimes portrayed with reddish skin or fur. So there's a lot of red there, but there's an argument out there that we got the color red. We know Satan as the color red from Faust. So Faust is a classic German legend, most famously depicted by Goethe, about a scholar named Faust who, dissatisfied with his life and knowledge, makes a pact with the devil, Mephistopheles, in exchange for unlimited wisdom and pleasure. As Faust indulges in earthly desires and experiences, he ultimately grapples with the consequences of his choices, including a ruin of innocent lives. In Goethe's version, Faust is ultimately redeemed through love and divine grace, while in earlier versions, he is punished for his hubris. And so in a lot of the ways that Faust was depicted over the years, he wears red. So this is like this kind of cartoony picture that you're seeing here with these like little monkeys that are sitting around, which I think is kind of funny. There's like a cauldron and there's, potion. And what we see Mephistopheles here is this illustration by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe's Faust by René Clark from 1932 is what you're seeing here. And then there's, but Faust was adapted into a lot of books, operas, ballads, dramas, movies, and puppet plays. And it was used in lots and lots of Mark Davis's concept art for the Haunted Mansion, which is what you are seeing here. This is actually some depictions of some devil-like characters, specifically, the seven-headed character. And also you can also see his devil figures here as well with a pointy tail, which I think is really, really fun. But then you can see, and then you see there was an unused concept art for the changing portraits in the Haunted Mansion. Now we've gone over the changing portraits extensively, but this one is the burning miser scene specifically. Now the burning miser, the whole concept is he's so greedy, he sells his soul to the devil, and then he ends up bursting into flames. So this is Mark Davis's concept art. So he actually made this one, and then this is Ed Cohn's version of it. He repainted a lot of the changing portraits in the Haunted Mansion. So you can see, I want to make this short, but there's in the Haunted Mansion, a lot of the changing portraits you see in the portrait gallery only go from 1 to 2, right? This way and then back to this way, except for maybe the April to December you see her in the Haunted Mansion in Disneyland's version. She actually fades through several different scenes, like seasons of the year, seasons of life. So in this one, though, all of these changing portraits, most of them were designed to have 6 different scenes. So they would transition slowly, fading one into the next as the slides changed, because this is the 1960s. So you see here the burning miser sitting in his chair, and then he slowly kind of starts to burn. Then he fully bursts into flames, and then he's the chair is on fire. And then you see Faust behind him holding a sold sign, and then the flames dissipate, and he's Mephistopheles, or Faust is sitting there with its thing. So, not Faust. The devil here is Mephistopheles. I want to clarify. I'm confusing the two. Faust is the guy who sells his soul, so he would be the burning miser in this situation, and then Mephistopheles would be the devil, the Satan character behind him. So my apologies for kind of confusing those two throughout here. But anyway, so this is kind of a really fun picture, but I really want to point out this is where we're heading to the Haunted Mansion for just a brief section, because you know how we love the Haunted Mansion. Because if you look at this chair here, we didn't actually get this changing portrait in the Haunted Mansion, but we did get this design on the chair. Is probably similar to the design we see. This is the chair that the grandmother sits in the grand hall. And it has this kind of curly, devil-like things. And it's, we have the other chair that is in the endless hallway scene, next to the endless hallway scene. But this design is different than that one. And I do want to give a full shout out to the long forgotten Haunted Mansion blog, who is the one that kind of like put some of these pieces together. So this didn't come from me. It came from them. Really, really great resource for the Haunted Mansion. But anyway, Faust probably was an influence for the color red. I think that that's probably a good connection in terms of like, I don't think that's the only place that we got the color red. I think that they pulled that from all of these, Christianity and, Greek mythology. Red had been, the color of evil essentially forever. And again, we see it as the color of danger for us now. But I also have something from the Screwtape Letters from C.S. Lewis in 1941. Lewis suggested that making the devil silly has contributed to the belief that demonic activity does not exist. So it's written, that whole book, if you haven't read it, Elliot's like doing a deep dive into it right now. So I've been hearing a lot about Screwtape Letters, but it's written from the point of view of a demon. And so this is a little excerpt from it. It says, the fact that devils are predominantly comic figures in the modern imagination will help you. If any faint suspicion of your existence begins to arise in his mind, suggest to him a picture of something in red tights and persuade him that since he cannot believe in that, it is an old textbook method of confusing them, he therefore cannot believe in you. So again, reinforcing the idea that they wear red tights or something, like the comic version of demons wear red tights, which is making them seem less scary, I guess. I have one more thing to share about this before we move on. And this is a alternate concept of Mephistopheles acquiring Faust's soul this is by Mark Davis. You can see a man in a chair and slowly he bursts into flames and he becomes a demon as he in this transition. So this is again another like changing portrait that never came to pass. But I think it's really fascinating that Mark Davis made all these different interesting concepts for Faust that never got used. And so you can see these are like early on in the Haunted Mansion when they were talking about using kind of famous characters in the Haunted Mansion. He made these kind of early concept sketches of the demon kind of like actually grabbing Faust and pulling him away, which is really fascinating, I think. So anyway, just a little bit of Mark Davis's depictions of Faust and demons and whatnot. Are we ready to move on, Kirk? Are you good?
That segment has been called The Devil in You by Mark Davis. Narrated by Kate the Disney Cicerone.
It's true. Yeah, that was, I love Mark Davis. So anytime I get to talk about him.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. Who doesn't? Let's move forward. Kirk, do you want to take us in? We haven't really done a video of kind of moving through this scene a little bit. Do you want to take us into this?
Yeah, let me take us from, I'll take us from when we get hit by the train and head into the hot place.
Okay.
Ooh. It is pretty immense. Like all the stalagmites and all the rock work looks spectacular.
It does. Yeah. And so we end up in this place now just past the demon judge, who does look like he's behind a bench, by the way. Like they have this on like rock work that looks very much like the bench we saw in the previous scene, right?
It is.
But just to his left, we actually see kind of this flat screen that has it looks like fire on it. And I think that it looks like a projection of fire, not the same fire as in Pirates of the Caribbean, because that has it has blowing silk with lights and like wind, that's how they achieve that fire effect. This is really different. It looks almost like a projection or like some lights rotating or something behind it. And so I looked up some pictures of it because I was trying to figure it out. In this one, it's like somebody took like a flash picture. This looks like an older version of this where I don't know if you can see it, Kirk, but it looks like there's like shapes of almost like demons like holding pitchforks in it.
Okay.
And I'm like, I think that this effect might have looked different before because there still looks like there's some fire at the bottom. But this to me looks like there used to be some projections of demons in this window and not just fire.
Yeah, it's hard to tell, but it looks like figures in red. And as we know, red demons in tights, who doesn't love them? Everybody does.
But now, of course, they just have this kind of more projection of general fire. And it is really hot in this scene, which we haven't really talked about too much, but it is steamy, hot, humid, but only later on in the day. If you go in the morning, it's usually pretty cool in there.
Hottogo.
We will take our toad to go. Anyway, we did have some photos that are courtesy of a Distory listener, Veronica, who was evacuated off of Mr. Toad's Wild Ride recently and said, hey, I have some photos for you to kind of see what it looks like with the work lights on, which was so great. So I think this one came from that collection. So thank you, Veronica, for that. But you can actually see the water droplets from the humidity dripping down this screen. And you also get a really great picture of the rock work, how they've added kind of like red drips on top of like the stalagmite, stalactites.
It's almost like a magma-y, molten, drippy.
Exactly. But anyway, so thank you for that. And it does get progressively hotter as the day goes on, so much so that they do have to vent Mr. Toad when it gets too hot in there, so that they actually have places and ways of venting it to kind of let some of the heat out, because they have all of this like humidity in this room. It is hot in there if you go late in the day. They also have some fire that kind of comes up from these holes in the rockwork, mostly on the left-hand side, but I think there might be one on the right too. And I looked at it because I was trying to figure out how in the world like they get these like puffs of like almost like smoke like coming out of these holes in the rockwork. And to me, it looks like fog is blowing up, and then there's lights underneath them that illuminate it so that it makes the fog look like red. So it's like fire, brimstone, hot place. We got all kinds of stuff going on.
Yeah.
And then the stalactites or stalagmites, do you know which one it is? I can't remember. The ones that hang down from the ceiling. I never know.
I don't know.
I can never
remember. A mite or
remember.
a tight. I'll look it up. You
Okay.
just keep talking.
So the stalactites or stalagmites that are hanging from the ceiling, I wonder if they're similarly created, Kirk, to the ones that are in Big Thunder Mountain Railroad inside the cavern that we go in the first scene. Because they would have already made those recently in Disney history at this point, because Big Thunder Mountain opened in 1979, and then this was renovated and created in 1981 to 83. So it's just a few short years later. So if you remember, we talked about that, the way that they made that. Skip Lang actually said they went to Pep Boys and got a grease gun.
To do that for Big Thunder, yeah.
Yeah, and they filled it up with cement and then let it dribble down the stalactites. Maybe it's stalactites, as I have that here.
Tights are above. Mites are below.
Okay, so stalactites. They said they had no manual for how to create these things. They just had to figure it out and invent a way. So I would be shocked if they didn't make these similarly to the ones that they made in Big Thunder, because they'd already figured out that technique for how to make them look good. And I think that's probably what they did for this as well. So a grease gun, get your grease gun, fill it up with cement, you got yourself some stalactites.
Get your grease gun.
So let's talk a little bit about the cow devils, which I think are a lot of people's favorite thing in the scene, including my own.
Yes, they are.
They are adorable. So they are these, like, I call them the Wiggly devils because they wiggle back and forth, and they're so cute. And remember, these used to be painted flats until 1961 is when they re-sculpted them, and they made them out of rubber. So, which is also cute. They're made out of rubber, but they were sculpted by Blaine Gibson, and he also did a lot of other sculpting, including he eventually helped make the partner statue, but he did all of the animatronics for, Pirates of the Caribbean and a whole bunch of other things. But there's also some Wiggly devils that I found when I was watching the Night in Bald Mountain sequence.
Nobody calls them that.
I'm going to call them that. The cow devils. I call them the Wiggly devils because I think they're cute. But there are some of these guys in the Night on Bald Mountain sequence as well that have the little pointed tails, and they actually are falling into the fire here as with Chernabog in charge. So I think that that also possibly could have been an influence, especially considering that we have the jaws of heck that we passed through earlier. I almost said it. But something that's interesting about these little guys is that they were voiced by Candy Candido, who voiced a lot of other things in Disney as well. So he looks like this, but he had that deep, like, gravelly voice. So if you hear the cackling, they're like, the cackling sound, that's what come from Candy Candido. I think we heard it more in the 1955 version. Don't laugh at my cackle. I'm not Candy Candido. I can't cackle like a devil. Hey, don't make those faces at me. Anyway, Candy Candido also voiced the Indian chief in Peter Pan from 1953, one of Maleficent's goons in Sleeping Beauty. Think of that deep, gravelly voice that is iconic in Disney history. That was from 1959. He did the Captain of the Guard Crocodile from Robin Hood, 1973. And also in The Haunted Mansion, because I can't stop talking about The Haunted Mansion today, Gus, the prisoner hitchhiker Gus, he also voiced him in the Grim Grinning Ghosts song with a deep, gravelly voice. So the voice of Gus is Candy Candido, who's also the voice of the Wiggly Cow Devils. You're welcome for that. He also did the Angry Apple Tree in The Wizard of Oz, which I think is really fun. So if you like Wizard of Oz history. That's all I have on the Wiggly Devils, unless you have any more that you don't want
I
me to...
do.
Okay.
Oh, do I ever. Buckle up, kids. It's Wiggly Devil time.
Woo! Let's go.
Today, I'm going to tell you the story of the stolen Wiggly Devil.
The stolen Wiggly Devil. Ooh.
Come along with me to the Santa Cruz Boardwalk.
Okay.
In 1908, the scenic railway builder L.A. Thompson established his huge beachfront attraction, and he never finished the scenery except for his ride because his beachfront location was naturally a splendid backdrop of its own. Charles Loof, acclaimed East Coast merry-go-round manufacturer, delivered a carousel to the Santa Cruz Boardwalk in 1911. His concessionaire son built the Giant Dipper in 1924, removing the slower-paced railway scenic system. But also in 1908, the Beach Company erected a large building where today houses the Haunted Castle. But this originally was a 4-lane bowling alley. So if you catch my drift, we're going to turn a bowling alley into a dark ride. And this is in Santa Cruz, California. Very important because Imagineers may or may not have visited here, although I strongly suspect that they did. This bowling alley occupied the bulk of this area until the 1930s when our first dark ride, this is coming from the Santa Cruz Boardwalk's history page, our first dark ride was established. This dark ride was also a product of the concessionaire and ingenuity of this man, Ed Riker.
Okay.
Ed Riker came from, guess where? Coney Island, New York.
Oh, okay. All right.
Who would have thought? So he operated game concessions there when he was just 15 years old. The Boardwalk archives revealed that Ed showed up at the Boardwalk in 1921 and ended up being a general manager, but he was very personable, and people got to know him and allowed him to eventually redesign the bowling lanes into a dark ride. So this was designed, built, and operated by Ed Riker, and it is going to be known as Dante's Inferno.
Oh, okay.
So in 1932, Dante's Inferno, A Trip to Hades, was created with 6 hand-built cars that are conveyed adventurous guests through a maze of home-built sets and gotchas. That's like, I guess, their version of what they would consider gags.
Or like a gotcha, like a gag.
Yeah, like something that like jumps out and like kind of like jump
scare.
scares.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But now, not only does it have a really super fun giant devil head with wings and multiple devils on the top that you can see here, but let's zoom in because I think on the left-hand side, right at that loading platform, there may be something that you want to see.
Oh.
What is that? But a Wiggly Devil. And my friends, I rest my case that the Imagineers stole the Wiggly Devil design from when they came to Dante's Inferno in the 1930s.
Okay. Here, hold on. Let's do a side-by-side. They're not as cute. I will say that.
They Disney-fied them.
They Disney-fied
It's not like
him.
they're going to take this ugly thing and put that in there. What are you, crazy?
Yeah, he looks like he has like feet like a satyr or something. And then
Right, but he's got that thick bottom, that apple bottom jeans, tried in with the 3, But he's got the tail, he's got the build, he looks like a pear, He's very cow devil.
Yeah, I could see that. Definitely being an inspiration. No, that's interesting. Yep. Well done,
Isn't that
Kirk.
cool?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Man, that's so obscure.
And the other part is on the right-hand side of this photo. It does say doorway to HELL. So I just love that this is definitely this attraction itself, just because the fact that it's only a couple hours away from like Anaheim, and probably some Imagineers grew up going on this attraction and visited this stuff. Now, the only thing that kind of messes things up just a hair, is that this ride doesn't stay Dante's Inferno for that long. It only stays that way for 2 years, and then it gets rethemed into Laughland, which is more kiddie comedic. But
that's a big change.
There were some spooky devils and awesomeness to be found at Dante's Inferno.
Huh.
I mean, I read some like message board stuff that was like quoted from somebody from the Monterey Bay properties. And it said, one of the parks they visited was California's own Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk, where the Haunted Castle is today, was a dark ride entitled Dante's Inferno, which was just that, a dark ride that was based on Heck and the Divine Comedy. Would you believe that you rode through Heck in your very own motor car? Well, we all know what Walt's film The Wind of the Willows mentions. The Imagineers enjoyed this dark ride so much that they decided to incorporate it in some way into Disneyland and making it the finale of Mr. Toad's final ride. My problem is, there is no zero information beyond just this one opinion. And I found this dark ride separate from this. So then I started typing in keywords with the dark ride and Imagineering, and then it popped me up to this message board. So I grain of salt in terms of if this actually does have a physical connection, but by gosh, is there way too many similarities.
Yeah, no, I agree that it's a definite possible influence.
I would love to know. I need my smoking gun though.
I know.
Where's my smoking gun, Kate?
What year did you say that opened? When did it operate?
So this operated from 1932 to 1934. It still exists there. It's just now called the Haunted Castle, which it got rethemed in 1973. So, but it's at the Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk, 1932 to 1934.
Well, I mean, if you think about like Ken Anderson, who worked on Snow White in the 1930s at Disney, possibly would have been there. But of course, you have to think in the 1930s, they weren't doing theme park research at that point. So it really would have had to be pulled from their memory.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is like, don't you think any of these kids in Cali, one of them took a trip up to Santa Cruz for, you got to go on. They're doing it. I mean, dark rides weren't even a thing. It was literally like, this would have been so ahead of its time. And if you were a kid that was into like macabre and attractions, I just feel like there's way too many possibilities. And this would be like a 20-year memory or a childhood memory of like, I remember there was like these really cool, cute little devil things.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that is a definite possibility that they had pulled it from their childhood memory and then reinvented it to make this thing. So yeah, it's interesting. Thanks, Kirk. I like that.
Yeah. Hey, man, don't thank me. Thank the internet for still having pictures of this thing from the 30s. I mean, there's only 3 pictures of it that exist.
Can you go back to the little devil again? It would make sense for somebody's memory of this thing. There was this little tiny devil that was holding a trident that had this little tail and had like,
I mean, it's kind of shape, you're waiting in line. Imagine you're a kid, you're waiting in line and you're staring at this thing. You're literally, that's the weenie of the attraction is that little devil. Like you're just staring at it. There's nothing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that could, and if it was your first dark, everybody remembers their first ride or first rides. And that would have to be an iconic thing. I wish I knew scene by scene because I just think that's neat. It has nothing to do with Mr. Toad necessarily, but I was trying to figure out where and how they came up with the Wiggly Cow Devils.
Oh, brilliant.
Speaking of which, can you please make a Wiggly Devil shirt? You need to for Distory.
Oh, I do. Yeah.
That should be a thing.
Yeah. Okay. I'll work on that.
Yeah.
All right. Are we ready to move on to the main event?
The main event.
The main event. Do you want to take us in a video-wise to show what this looks like?
Whee!
You
I
can
do
see
like
the
how they
Wiggly
pop up,
dimples.
man.
I know they're
This
so
cow dolls
cute.
are the best. All right,
Yeah.
we're stopping in front of a giant green dragon with a horn. What's this, Kate? What are we looking at?
Right. It's crazy, right? It was not in the 1955 version at all. It's a giant green dragon who's actually coughing, which is weird. And it also has, when he coughs, it looks like it lights up like he's breathing fire on you when he coughs. So I'm like, what in the world is going on here? Why is this dragon here? So I dug into history a little bit. There is a dragon in Revelation in the Bible. In Revelation 12:3 describes a vision of a great red dragon with 7 heads, 10 horns, 7 crowns, and a massive tail. It says, and war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. The dragon and his angels fought back, but they were defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. Dragon the Great was thrown down, the ancient serpent who is called Devil and Satan, the one deceiving the whole inhabited world. He was thrown down to earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. So this is something that's been, around very, very, very long time. Revelation, of course, is kind of this prediction of what will happen in end times is what we're getting this from.
Dude, he's snapping that dragon's neck like Godzilla, or not Godzilla, like King Kong does to the T-Rexes, man.
So this is where we get this idea of a dragon being associated with hell. I'm going to say it.
Oh! That would be number 4.
In the Middle Ages, the devil sometimes is depicted as a 6-headed dragon. There's illustrations from like a 14th century French manuscript called the Smithfield Decretals, who had a winged creature, which is a dragon. Here's another kind of some more art that you can see as like Satan with these giant wings and kind of like scales and horns. And also in Dante's Inferno as well. I asked this of Elliot because he also teaches literature in his college that he teaches at. So he extensively studied Dante's Inferno. Like if you want somebody who knows Dante's Inferno inside and out, talk to Elliot. He knows what he's talking about. And I was like, is there a dragon in this? And he's like, well, not really. But here's the passage from Dante's Inferno. It says, describes Satan as having 2 mighty wings, such as befitting were so great a bird. Sails of the sea I never saw so large. No feathers had they, but that of a bat. So we get this illustration here, which we showed earlier when Kirk was talking about the gate ride that he was talking about. But you can see this is from Canto 34, 49 through 51, in case you're looking for exactly where it's at in Dante's Inferno. But it does look like a dragon-ish in this. I only see 2 horns that look more like Pan in a lot of these depictions of it. I don't see 1. So I feel like that's kind of like the Disney-fying of it is almost to make it into like a unicorn dragon, to make it cuter or less threatening or something. I don't know why they have unicorn. Do you have any thoughts on why he looks like a unicorn?
I don't know, because it's a strange spiral horn. Makes no sense.
I haven't been able to find any sort of art that depicts Satan as a dragon with a unicorn horn. So that to me seems like their own interpretation of a dragon.
Can I show 2 pictures real quick?
Yeah.
So this is what I grew up going to at the Wildwood Boardwalk. And as soon as I saw this dragon for the first time, I immediately thought of Dante's Inferno, which was a little crappy dark ride. It was like a permanent carnival one, but I mean, giant green devil with horns. Eventually he changes to gray when they repaint him and they add a trident and a nunchuck. I don't know what it's I think it's actually one of those like kind of like cat of nine tails, or almost like a mace, and maybe the top had fallen off or whatever. But when I was a kid, I grew up going on this thing, and what was crazy is there was like these almost like rock hydras on the side. You can barely see it on this picture, but they actually all move too. So like if you want to know why this part of Distory is a little too into this stuff, this is the stuff I would go on when I was 6. So yeah,
that explains so much about you, Kirk. Quite honestly,
I really hope it does. to be honest.
Really?
'Cause it's-
Like, this has shaped your personality. This green dragon dude.
I am a green dragon devil. Just call me that.
But really, like, let's look at them side by side. This is what I grew up going to when I was 6. I went when I was 2, and I saw it when I was 6. I saw this green devil, and you saw that one when you were 6. And so here we are, all these years later.
Yep.
Explains so much.
Still enjoying spooky green devils.
I was trying to figure out why in the world he's coughing at you. And I was like, it's such a weird thing. Like, it's like one final threat, maybe, that if he's a dragon and he has his mouth open, and if he's going to cough on you, he's obviously going to, like, cough fire on you, right? So it's one final threat before you leave.
Let me clear my throat.
That's the only thing I can figure is it's also actually quite funny that he coughs at you. He's not growling. He's not making it scary. He's just has a cold.
Yeah.
You know? And have you ever read that book, as an aside? Have you ever read that book with your kids, Dragons Love Tacos?
Oh my God. There's a sequel too. It's really good.
I haven't seen the sequel. So my kids
it's
are
great.
out.
Yeah.
But, you know, the idea is that if dragons have spicy salsa, then they're going to, like, cough and like, breathe
It's a great
fire
picture
over
book.
you. Oh, it's so great. So if you like dragons and you like fire and you like tacos, that's a great recommended read. But anyway, this made me think of it every time. It's obviously no relation because that book was way after this ride, unless they reference this ride.
And there's no tacos in Mr. Toad's.
No, sadly. They should have more tacos than Mr. Toad's.
They should have more tacos in every ride.
We demand more tacos. That's pretty much like the end of this scene. But before we leave it, I do want to mention, I just want to throw back. We did an extensive talk about it. I got on my soapbox for quite a bit a couple episodes ago about the hot place in this scene. And, you know, people will say it's, you know, it's right below the Queen scene in Alice in Wonderland. And that's why it's so hot in the Queen scene, is that you're getting the heat rise up from the hell scene in Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. Did I use all of them yet? Was that 5 or 6?
No, you got one more.
Okay. I got one. I got to use it in a good place. But no, and obviously this isn't possible. I can show you. This is the ride layout that we went over in that episode. And you can see the HE double hockey stick scene at the very bottom is Mr. Toad in this yellow part. And then the golden afternoon scene is what overlaps part of Mr. Toad, but not even all the way down to the scene that we're in now. And then the Queen room is way on the other side of the building. So it is virtually impossible for it to be over the hot place at all. If anything, people were saying, well, then why is it hot in there? And honestly, I even really paid specific attention in that scene. I was like, it is not any degrees hotter in here. It's not. It doesn't feel hot at all. If it does, if you think it does, it's because it's near 2 exterior doors. And sometimes it's hot in California and those doors open like every couple seconds, you know? Those doors are opening up to the hot weather outside. So it's just, I think, a byproduct of the hot air from outside coming into that scene. And that's why it feels warmer in Alice in Wonderland. But anyway, I'll get off my soapbox for that. People ask me all the time, well, then why do you end up, I'm going to say it, why does Toad end up in hell? It's my last one. I'm done now.
You're done, dude.
Why does he end up in this hot place? Because he doesn't in the book. He doesn't in the movie. He doesn't anywhere. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Well, if you remember back in the concept art for Bruce Bushman, this is a Motor Mania concept that they, I guess, were considering for Tomorrowland, because that's what it says at the bottom of this concept art. You know, he didn't actually end up in the hot place here. If you look at it, it says there's heavenly music, and then there's a gently undulating track going back and forth, and then there's the pearly gates at the end. And so you actually end up in heaven and not the hot place. And that was the original intention of it. So why did they end up in the hot place instead? Well, the Imagineers just thought it would make people laugh. That's really all there is to it. They thought it would be funny. They thought it would shock people that you ended up in this place and then make them laugh. And also probably combined too with what Kirk said about this was kind of common to see in these dark rides from, you know, way back when. It wasn't uncommon to see that. It wasn't like, there's a lot of people who are just like, I can't believe they would put that in a family ride. Well, Bill Martin said, I remember the meeting when we thought of the train coming at you idea. That was a catch-on gag, the last effect at the end of the ride that sends you to H-E double hockey sticks. The idea of going through the devil's mouth through the jaws of H-E double hockey sticks was okay with Walt at the time too. Obviously, I'm substituting in my own words because Kirk only allowed me 6 of that particular word for this episode, and I've used them all. But he said Walt was okay with it. Walt thought it was fine too. And of course, if Walt Disney had been like, no, we can't do that, like you can't send him there, it would have been different. It's similar to when Claude Coates at the end of Alice in Wonderland, what used to be the end of Alice in Wonderland, when you would go through the double doors and then you hear the goofy yodel, right? Like, and it's still there today. He just added that to make people smile and laugh because it was silly. And so that's all this scene is meant to be, is it's just there to entertain you, to make you laugh, that you ended up in this bizarre place that nobody expected to go. That's why it's there. That's it. That's all there is to it. People wanted a greater meaning. That's it.
It's not like we're on a normal ride. It's a wild ride, kids.
Right. If you ended up in heaven, that would be too predictable, right?
Too predictable. Too nice.
But
this is more fun.
Well, and there's a lot of people that'll say, like, Toad is, drunk driving, and so he ends up where he's supposed to go. But we've talked about this before this episode. Yeah. He's not drunk. He's just manic. He's like, this is a mania. Yeah. He's just crazy out of his mind. Excited.
If there's any intoxication, it's just him intoxicated with the thought of motor cars.
Right. And I mean, he does do a lot of not great things throughout the attraction, running into people and running over stuff and all the things. And so, I mean, does he deserve to end up in a hot place for that? I don't know. But he didn't he wasn't doing anything horrible. He was just manic. He does escape from prison, I guess. So, but does that make him, is that enough to condemn him for all eternity with the Wiggly Devils?
You be the judge and jury.
And I have another thought, Kirk, and I thought, I just want to run this by you and we'll see what you think. So, is this really H-E double hockey sticks, or is this a really bad dream that he's having, like he's in a coma or something after getting hit by a train? Because if you think of it, everything is a remix of what we've seen before, right? It's like the Green Dragon is a remix from like the Green Dragon Inn. Like, we thought of it as like foreshadowing, okay? But what if it's just like he's taking things from his subconscious and like spinning them into this crazy dream? Like, Winkies, the inside of Winkies was green. We saw red with red warnings on barrels and stop signs. We saw red throughout the attraction. The judge and the devil are the same character. Like, it could be remixed in his head of like, this character became this one. And I mean, I don't really think that's what the Imagineers necessarily wanted to put in the ride, but could it be? What do you think?
No. Listen, I like, you're getting very meta, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I like the obscurity of it. However, for the intents of this conversation, and specifically Distory, I'm going to go with, they did it because it was fun. They did it because they visited other places or knew of other places that utilized this as a gag, and it worked really well. So they're taking inspiration from that. And although Bruce may have left a more angelic finale, it was better and funnier and more interesting to put us in another place. I don't think you were supposed to necessarily, as a guest, read into any of this, and you were just supposed to enjoy. And I still believe that that's true as to why it's successful, is because it's fun and because it's kooky and it's weird. And it has Mr. Toad, as we've learned throughout the course of doing this Distory series, has quite the following. And it's a very vocal, passionate minority subset of Disneyland adults.
Yeah.
And like, there would be massive issues if this attraction was ever to be removed.
Oh, and yeah.
I believe that's due to nostalgia, its quirkiness. I mean, we'll see that further when we lean into Walt Disney World's version next week, because there is definitely lots of controversy when we come to the close of that. It'll take us a while to get there, and we want to cover it in its entirety, but there are lots and lots of fans. I mean, as a kid, I was very disappointed when I found out that Mr. Toad was leaving Walt Disney World. So
I'm still heartbroken about it.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever got to go on it. I'm just heartbroken about it.
Yeah, I think that happens with a lot of things. If you never got a chance to experience it, you missed out. I have those. Everybody, I feel like, has those moments with attractions that are no longer around. Like, I would love to go back on Alien Encounter just once.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I've been thinking about that a lot, because there's a lot of discussion right now about, the rivers of America, disappearing and all of the changes in the Magic Kingdom right now. And I know that there's a lot of people that are just doing a lot of like grieving of things that like they've always kind of had at Disney. And it's like, this isn't the first time we've lost something that we really loved. This has happened again and again in Disney history. And it is hard because it is progress. It is moving forward. It is like what Walt wanted for his parks of, he said that Storybook Land canal boats was something that a little ride they would have for a little while until they tore it out and put something bigger in it. He said that. Like, and we thinking of now of like, oh no, Walt loved that ride with the miniatures and all the things, and there's no way he would ever want to get rid of it. But like you've said before, like, it's not meant to be a museum. It was never meant to be that way, but we've made it that way because of our nostalgia. And so if you really like go back to what Walt Disney wanted, he wanted things to change and move and grow and shift. And it's just hard because we have so many memories that are attached to it. It means something to us that's significant. And so watching things disappear is tough. It's really hard.
I think people get over it if the replacement seems justified or is an enhancement.
Yeah.
Like right now we're going through that transitionary period a lot at Walt Disney World. And it'll be interesting to see how people feel once we have an indie transition from Dinosaur and we have a transition from Rivers of America to Cars and Muppets to Monsters, Inc. I think people need to see that it's done well and it has elevated and enhanced the park rather than leaving you wanting. Like, sadly, I'll never get over this. I'll never get over Alien Encounter because they're not using anything in there. So that's just a loss.
Empty space.
Like if that was still Stitch's Great Escape, fine. I could go on Stitch's Great Escape and like remember the old one. It's just like Frozen. I don't really like Frozen. I like Maelstrom. But that's my only way that I can relive that experience and be on that track. I'm okay with that. It's
right.
But I can't, and I will refuse to be okay with Princess Hall.
Yeah.
Over Snow White.
100%.
I will never get over that. So
100%. And we're going to see next week, we'll dig into Toad and what they did to change Toad. And they did change it. So you can still go on some of it, but the track is not the same either. That's significantly different. There's not two tracks and whatnot. So we'll get into that next week. I don't want to dig into that too much now, but yeah, I agree. It's different when you can physically still go into the space and still kind of remember, and there's nods to it. I think that does help an awful lot versus the entire thing changing. And you're like, nothing of this is recognizable from what it used to be.
Sure.
Like, even if you're a huge, I don't want to get into debate about this, but like the Splash Mountain Tiana thing, you can still go on Splash Mountain, quote unquote, in terms of like the ride mechanism is the same. Yeah. You can still get the same experience of that. And you can still remember what used to be, even though the ride itself is different. So anyway, let's reel it back in because we just have to mention what we see right on the exit here before we totally leave Toad in Toad Hall in Disneyland and pop on over to Walt Disney World. So then we exit the ride, and then to the right, you can see that there is that blue boy portrait of Mr. Toad that is actually it's an oil portrait from Thomas Gainsborough from 1770. That is what it's modeled after. And I tried to find more information about it, and it was like he just did a bunch of portraits in this time, and this was one they chose. But it goes right in with Mr. Toad. They do this in Disneyland Paris too, where they put Toad's face in like famous portraits. They do it with the Mona Lisa and a whole bunch of others as well. So, and then just a little bit further, there is also a little Toad lamp with a little Toad reading a book, with a stack of books next to him, which I think is a throwback to The Wind in the Willows in the original origins of the story of Mr. Toad. And I think it's a very sweet little nod to the fact that all of this started with a book. So that is also there on the wall. As you exit, Kirk mentioned this way back when we did the exterior, but you don't notice it until you're exiting the building. And that is the sconce that is on the outside, which now makes sense to us because it is a dragon, like the green dragon we saw, though this one is made of iron and it's black. But there is a dragon, and then he is holding up a light, which kind of references the idea of him like breathing fire on you. So that you see right outside of the exit, specifically because it's a nod to what you just experienced on the inside of the attraction. I think that pretty much wraps up Mr. Toad in Disneyland, which has been a wild ride. So Kirk, do you have any final thoughts here as we wrap up this Disneyland version of Mr. Toad?
No.
Did you use all of yours?
I got nothing.
Did you use all 6?
No, I didn't. I saved 2 because I'm a good boy.
Hey, what are you trying to imply?
Just saying I didn't use all mine.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us for this episode of Distory. We hope you enjoyed heading into the hot place with us since I'm out of, I can't say it anymore, but hopefully it also answered a few questions about what's going on in this scene and clarified a few things, because I know this is one of the biggest questions that people ever ask about Mr. Toad is why does he end up where he ends up at the end? So thank you for being with us. We appreciate you guys, and we will head on over to Walt Disney World's version of Mr. Toad next time. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.